Well, across campuses nationwide, educators are facing new pressures over what they can and can't say in the classroom. Just last month, a Texas A&M professor was fired after a state lawmaker spotlighted her lesson on gender identity. And in Pennsylvania, the University of Pennsylvania suspended a tenured law professor over public comments deemed offensive. Now, here in Metro Atlanta, 11Alive has learned within the last little bit that a professor is under investigation for a potentially inappropriate social media post regarding Charlie Kirk's death. We just received a statement from campus officials saying the post is connected to a non-clinical faculty member who does not treat patients. It also says, quote, "We are looking currently into the situation and are unable to discuss personnel matters." Well, these cases highlight the growing clash between academic freedom, political pressure, and the limits of speech in higher education. So this morning we are diving deeper into this hot topic with Professor Alexander Volokh at Emory School of Law. Professor Volokh, so good to see you here with us this morning. Okay, so the big question, where does the line legally fall between academic freedom and a university's right to set these types of curriculum standards?
Well, if you're at a public university like UGA or Georgia State, they have to respect First Amendment, and so the Constitution guarantees some amount of free speech. If you're at a private university like my university, Emory, private employers, private organizations can basically do whatever they like. They're not subject to the First Amendment. They can fire people, they can kick people out. That said, most universities, including my own, have voluntarily adopted free speech codes. So I think that if a student or a staff member or even a professor, let's say off the clock on their own personal tweet, said, "I'm glad Charlie Kirk is dead," or "I love Hamas," or "I think that the January 6th riots were a great exercise in democracy," or whatever, it doesn't matter left or right. But if they did that on their own time, I think at my university, they would be protected because we've voluntarily adopted a free speech code.
All right, well, you mentioned some of the headlines. We've been talking a lot about DEI and the rollbacks and the recent assassination of activist Charlie Kirk, a lot to talk about. So do you find it tougher perhaps to ride that fine line between just a mere discussion and what's considered political or public activism?
Well, I think that when a professor like me, when I speak in class, I think that the university has a greater ability to say things like, well, we hire you to teach constitutional law. You have to talk about constitutional law. Don't talk about physics, or don't talk about bankruptcy law, and we want you to teach these doctrines and so on, because that's my speech for the university in class. But if it's just outside of school, my own personal tweets or Facebook, I think that the university has very little legitimate interest in policing what I say, and in fact, it has a substantial interest in protecting the wide open, free flow of debate.
Yeah, and that was going to lead to what I was going to ask you. When a university does decide to discipline a professor, in this case, what First Amendment considerations might come into play?
Well, at a private university like Emory, absolutely none, because private parties are just not subject to the First Amendment. The First Amendment only controls government. So that means that you're protected by the First Amendment at a public university like UGA or Georgia State, and there, you don't have complete protection, but at a public university, the university probably has a more legitimate interest in controlling what you say in the classroom, less legitimate interest in what goes on outside of the classroom, but the Supreme Court has been fairly moderate about that. So if you say something and it's so controversial that now you're in all the headlines and everyone hates you and so on, I think that a professor ought to be protected even in that context, but I think the Supreme Court has taken a more moderate view and has said that you kind of weigh the university's interest and the professor's interest. At a private university like Emory, because of our voluntary speech code, we still look to the First Amendment, even though we don't have to, and I think we would probably take the same view.
You mentioned Emory, being a private university. How has it been for you and your colleagues in particular when it comes to what you can and can't say? You kind of alluded to that, but have there been any changes to the policy over the years as we've seen more public discourse?
In fact, because There were a lot of things that happened as a result of the Israel-Gaza war, and at Emory, within the last 2 years, there have been huge protests about that, arrests, and so on. There's been a lot of controversy. In fact, we just amended our free speech policy at Emory University. And in my view, I think it clarifies even more strongly that we voluntarily adopt First Amendment-like standards. That is, I think that my university has very little legitimate interest in shutting people down if they say, I really like Hamas or whatever. That's precisely the sort of thing that people should be able to debate at universities. And in fact, I haven't seen the fallout yet from things related to Charlie Kirk, but I would think that the best way to honor the legacy of Charlie Kirk is to allow people to say, I'm glad Charlie Kirk is dead, because that's precisely the sort of thing that he would have said and that he probably did say in various other contexts and would have expected to be protected. And I think that it's good that we protect even bad people when they say bad things.
But is there a hesitancy, you would say, more in light of all the controversy that we're seeing within even just the last few days for professors to perhaps not even touch these topics at all?
Well, yeah, I think unfortunately, some professors might feel that they have to hold back. I think the important thing for universities to do is to make clear to everyone, students, staff, faculty, we have your back. And if you say something, especially on your own time, if you say something offensive on your own time about political or social issues, that's your business. And universities ought to say, we will stand fast against the bullies who want us to fire you or who want us to kick you out.
All right.
In fact, I think the bullies who are trying to get people fired or kicked out, they are the greatest menace right now, not just individuals who might spout off with an ill-considered tweet, endorsing violence against somebody. That's just individuals with, maybe immature views. But the people who want to pressure universities to kick out students and to fire professors, like, that's the true war against intellectualism. That's the true war against universities and public debate.
Professor Alexander Volokh, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you.